Thank you all so much for being here. I'm not sure if you're aware, but this is the North American premiere of the restoration. So you're getting to see it first. So I want to start by addressing the possible elephant in the room here. When you heard that Paramount was restoring this film, you probably thought, why? Right? I'm sure some of you did. So it's a fair question. The previous restoration looks really good, and honestly, I get it. And that's exactly where we began when we started preparing for the 75th anniversary and this new restoration. We thought, do we need to restore Sunset Boulevard again? The 2012 restoration done for Paramount Centennial was a remarkable achievement. My predecessors approached it with real care and technical expertise, and it still holds up. So the next question became, how do you improve something that already looks that good? What does a new restoration offer? Not just in terms of newer, but how can you make it meaningfully better? And this is the challenge we face with a lot of restoration work today. Technology keeps evolving, and so do the ways we watch movies. What might have looked perfect on Blu-ray a decade ago might look soft on an HDR or 4K screen today. Audio that once sounded clean might now feel overly processed or flat. So we start where we always do, by looking back, not to undo what's been done, but to ask, what can we do now that we couldn't do then? So we always look to enhance and not to lose what already worked. And that's where this 2025 restoration really began. The first major digital restoration for Sunset Boulevard was in 2002, and it used the Lowry process. Now, this was a groundbreaking process. It was a digital image cleaning system used on Star Wars, Indiana Jones, on the James Bond series. It used hundreds of computers, 300 of them, as a matter of fact, and it cleaned frame by frame, cleaning the image. For DVD, it was perfect. But when HD came along, it really showed what the trade-off became visible. It had removed too much grain. So the image looked overly smooth, and that organic texture, the character of film, was gone. It was faster than Joe Gillis's Hollywood Dreams, gone. So in 2012, the second restoration was done to celebrate Paramount's 100th anniversary of the film. That version used the third generation 35mm dupe negative and a fine grain positive, with an emphasis on restoring a more filmic look to the film. So the mono audio was also restored for this version, and it was, and still is, a very impressive piece of work. It's set at a very annoyingly high bar for us. So again, as we prepared for the 75th anniversary, we asked, what can we do now, not to replace what was done before, but to build on it? We began by evaluating every available element that we had. Sadly, the original negative for this film is lost, like many elements from the 1950s. So, like before, we relied on a third generation dupe negative. We also tested a vintage 35mm film print because some film prints in the 1950s were actually struck directly from the original camera negatives. And we hoped that maybe this would give us better detail than a third generation dupe negative. But after scanning it, after zooming in and comparing at a pixel level, it was clear the dupe negative still held the best overall quality. So then we addressed problems for which we have now better tools than we had before. Tools to help image stability, for example, have vastly improved since then. And this time we corrected subtle jitter, gate weave with even greater precision than we were able to do before. So we also looked at every shot scene by scene to see if we had other better surviving material for little pieces. And during that process, we found something, or rather, we found that we didn't find something. There were 14 missing frames, tiny gaps, but enough to create visible jump cuts all throughout the film. In the 2012 restoration, many of these were filled in using other elements, often lower generation sources. And at first, we were considering doing the same thing, but then we brought in our restoration vendors, Paramount Post and MTI, and we asked, could we digitally bridge these gaps? Now, recreating missing frames has been done in restorations for years, but it wasn't something that we had done in this film before. So we digitally reconstructed the missing frames using adjacent material, and the results are seamless. Don't believe me? Try and find them. 14 frames in a 2-hour film may not sound very impressive, but removing 14 jump cuts, that is a huge difference. So just like the image, we faced challenges with the sound in this film. We no longer have the film's original audio elements. The best surviving mono source has a very high noise floor, which gave this film loud hiss throughout the film. So in previous restorations, this was addressed by rolling off the high and the low frequencies in the audio. So this reduces the hiss and the rumble, and it gives you a more listenable, more pleasurable track. But it also trims away the nuance. And if there's one thing that Gloria Swanson's Norma Desmond performance demands, it is nuance. Her voice, her pauses, her shifting tone, her command of sound is essential to the character. And earlier mixes slightly flatten those subtleties. You wouldn't notice it unless you compared it directly with the raw audio that we had, but once you do, it's really hard to unhear. So we tried modern tools to reduce the noise floor without compromising the performance, but nothing quite worked. And we started to feel like we were going to be stuck with a high noise floor because we just couldn't go back to not having those nuances. But then we saw Peter Jackson's documentary, The Beatles Get Back. And I know what you're thinking, what does that have to do with Norma Desmond? But for that documentary, Jackson's team at Park Road Post in New Zealand had used their own in-house AI-assisted tools to separate mono recordings into isolated dialogue and music. Now this was very similar what we needed to do for Sunset Boulevard. So we reached out and we asked if their technology could help us on the film. And to our delight, they were eager to test it out. Within a few weeks, they sent over a test clip, and the separation was absolutely stunning. Dialogue, music, and effects cleanly separated. It felt like magic. But there was a catch. It was too clean. And don't get me wrong, it was technically perfect, but as someone who can quote nearly every line of Sunset Boulevard, ask my husband, he gets annoyed by it, I could tell something was off. And I wasn't the only one in the room that felt that way because my colleagues can also quote every line of the film. Because what works for a documentary for normal speech pattern doesn't always work for a performance-driven drama. And Swanson's voice, again, had lost just a little something. So we sent back a very descriptive request to Park Road, probably way too detailed of notes and feedback that made no sense, sorry Park Road, but they adjusted their approach and they absolutely found it. They dialed it in. And they delivered to us a mono track that retained all the warmth, the air, and the dramatic weight of the original while lowering the noise floor. Mono separated dialogue tracks. So what they delivered wasn't just technically impressive, it was emotionally faithful. And for the first time, we had split elements, dialogue, music, and effects, without all that awful noise floor. So with these isolated elements, we also had a rare opportunity. We could create a discrete 5:1 surround mix. Now, usually we do not do this for a film from 1950, but we decided to test it just to hear what that might sound like. We gave the parameters to the audio engineer, and honestly, I was ready to say, thanks, but no thanks. But I went in with an open mind and listened to what he did, and I was floored because it really worked. The voiceover narration just sounded natural in a surround field. Franz Waxman's score gently filled the room. It wasn't overpowering. It was just a bit more immersive. It still felt like Sunset Boulevard, just a little more alive. You're probably not even going to notice that what you're hearing tonight is a 5:1, except for maybe during the car chase, where we might have had a little fun panning the tire squeals from the left to the right when he gets a blowout, so we did that. But otherwise, we kept it subtle. We were trying to remain respectful to the story. And honestly, to us, that's the heart of this restoration. It's not about reinventing the film. And it's not about showing off the latest tools just because we can. It's about giving a film the space to feel like itself again. With all the richness, the strangeness, and the texture that makes Sunset Boulevard such a special film, restoration is always about collaboration. It's across departments, and sometimes it's across decades and across generations, like this film. We stand on the shoulders of those who came before us, and we work with deep gratitude for what they accomplished. And we try, carefully, respectfully, to just add something meaningful for the future. We approach Sunset Boulevard with reverence for its artistry, its legacy, and for its fiercely loyal fans, which some of us also happen to be. Our goal wasn't to modernize it. Our goal was to let it breathe again. Before I go, I want to wrap up and take a moment to thank some incredible people who worked on the restoration with me.